First, I'd like to say thank you to Justin, because this whole thing was made possible because of all the work and dedication that Justin has done over the last, how long have you been working on this, Justin?
3 years we've been doing this.
Yeah, 3 years, but for this event, this year.
Huge effort with a ton of people on the volunteer community. So we'll talk about that later on, but thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. So, as Justin mentioned, my name is Frank Schettini. My name gets butchered so many times, it's not funny. Up until a week ago, I was the Chief Information Officer. We had our executive retreat, and lo and behold, I found out my new title is Chief Innovation Officer. What does that mean? Well, I still have IT, but now I have all of thought leadership, research, and everything. So actually, cybersecurity, the stuff I'm going to be talking about today, actually now reports to me effectively last Friday. So luckily, I've been doing this for a while, so we'll have fun going through this. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of where you can get training, more specifically what's happening in the marketplace. So we're going to start with kind of globally some of the things we're seeing based on research that's being done out there. Then we'll narrow it real quickly to North America to validate what we're seeing globally. And then we'll talk about kind of what ISACA is doing, and more importantly, how you can really look at cybersecurity as a profession and how you can improve your situation as well. So without further ado, we'll start with global insights. So this comes from a PricewaterhouseCoopers study that actually just completed about 3 weeks ago. It's a global study, 10,000 people worldwide, 37% in North America. I can give you the other metrics if you really want. But really looking at what they're seeing, 10,000 CEOs, CIOs, C-suite people, what they're seeing in the space. And interestingly enough, and I know this is a shocker, they saw in 2015 that there's 38% more security incidents than in 2014. Can anybody guess or imagine what they think the percentage increase is going to be in 2016, or is it going to go down? Do we think we're safer this year than last year? Does anyone feel that way? I don't either. So we know these numbers are only going to increase. Theft of hard, IP increased 56%. And the cool thing is organizations are responding. How many of you work in organizations today that are actually investing more in cybersecurity than they were last year? Raise your hands. Yeah, most organizations are doing that. Board levels, board members as well as C-suite are now much more aware. Now the problem you have with that is they all panic that everything is a crisis. I just read an article about the Ukraine. I just read an article about this. What do I do about this? So part of our job as professionals is how do we temper that? Because in the end, this is all about risk management, right? So what we're going to want to go through is we need to have that education so we can communicate with them. We have the technical skills, and we also can have a business mindset when we have these conversations, because these are pragmatic conversations. So, and it gets personal. Does anyone recognize the letterhead there? So I got a letter 2 or 3 weeks ago from the Office of Personnel Management that my personal information had been breached. And here's the funny thing. So I did work at NSA as a contractor, so please don't shoot me yet. But that was 20 years ago. I haven't worked in the federal government for 20 years. And yet, amazingly enough, and this is kind of scary, they were able to track me down to where I live and send me a letter that information I gave them 20 years ago was compromised. So this isn't just an issue that's happening in organizations, it's happening to every one of us. The whole question and challenge of social engineering, of people taking what you say in Facebook and LinkedIn and stuff and patching that all together and creating, it's kind of scary actually when you think about it. But that's the way of the world today. So, and oh, by the way, so since they hacked me and since they took all my information, I do get 2 years of free credit reports. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's really going to help me. I did sign up for it. I was like, I might as well get something out of this deal since you have everything else of mine. So following along, so really organizations are really looking at how they can safeguard, right? And this one, the statistic up top here really scares me the most. 58% have an overall information security strategy. 58% have an overall information security strategy. What about the other 42%? What are they doing? What world are they in? So it's amazing, for all that we read in public today, in newspapers, see on television, all the sensationalism, 42% of global organizations do not still have an information security strategy. So obviously we have a ways to go from an education perspective too. But the good thing is more and more organizations are recognizing it. They're recognizing that they need better skilled people in terms of training. They realize that there's a real focus on that. With the economic downturn, basically most organizations just shut down all their training, right? That was one of the first things that went out the window in terms of expenses. We're seeing organizations starting to invest in their people more now, and that's really critical in this space. Cybercrime. This is from a different study last year from the Ponemon Institute, and really what they saw was significant increases from nation-state attackers. True story. In the U.S., the power grid, which is all the power companies and everything, was actually breached by a nation-state for over a year, and the U.S. did not know about it. So the future of war will not be drones coming in and flying out and stuff. It's going to be somebody destroying your infrastructure and then attacking you when there's chaos involved in terms of power and electricity. Luckily that was caught and that's been mitigated, but that just gives you a flavor for really what we're talking about in terms of the future. It's kind of scary. Cyber warfare, cyber terrorism is increasing, breaching, etc. So obviously we say that this is actually increasing. Now, counter to that is the fact that we don't have enough skilled people. And this is from that same study. It said 67% of the people surveyed said they really need better skilled people. So there's obviously a huge demand. And that's also the number one challenge that most CISOs have, is having the right number of skilled people. Are you guys getting kind of a common theme here? Large problem, not enough people, translates into tremendous opportunity. And that's really where we're at. So we can all sit here and read the papers, get scared about this, get scared about that, put our money under our bed, never do anything, never talk to anybody on the internet, never do anything. The opposite side of it is this is really an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to get the right level of skilled people in place, to really educate them and really provide value to the world. Because in the end, businesses are going to stop, right? We have to keep going. So the question is, how do we overcome these things? This is from a different study from the World Economic Forum this year. I think it was, actually I don't remember where it was held. I think it's Singapore this year. I don't remember where it was held this year. And one of the key things, you can't see it, but you'll see it in the slides, is information security analyst is actually an emerging job family that's really growing. So I'm going to highlight with that. John Olczyk predicted the following. Cybersecurity skills shortage. We're seeing CISOs really having a challenge getting the right level of skilled people across the board. Large firms are trying to develop their own training programs. So there's obviously a huge need. And to actually have a center of excellence, because really for us to be successful, these are some of the important characteristics that we need. So within the organization, we need to foster communication about cybersecurity across the organization. It's not just us as professionals talking about cybersecurity. It's everyone from the CEO to the admin to the janitor, whoever's actually going to be on the system, because it only takes one or two to do something inadvertent to cause a huge problem. So, but in the end, what we really want to do is the key problem, the key challenges, we really need to come up with an approach to provide a career path for cybersecurity professionals so we can grow them up from the schools all the way to the point where they become professionals and then they become experts. In North America, again, I only put one slide in here because I really don't want to bore you. Basically the same thing, and this actually comes from Burning Glass Technologies. They did a study in terms of demand for professionals. And really what it comes down to, there's a huge job growth in a nutshell. So we're seeing that. So that takes us to where we are at ISACA. So what we did about a year and a half ago was we got together a bunch of industry experts and put them in a room. We did a lot of market research on, okay, who are all the players in the marketplace? What are they doing? What are the problems that we want to solve? Because we didn't want to come out there and put something out there that really nobody wanted. So we said, what problem is it that we're trying to solve? And so we got them together and put together this story, and it's called the Cybersecurity Nexus program, which I'm going to walk through in a second. Now, the interesting thing is I just mentioned to you that I have a new job title. It's still CIO, by the way, so Justin, you are absolutely correct. I still am a CIO. But we actually have a follow-up to that working group meeting this Thursday and Friday in Orlando. So my travel this week was leaving 2 feet of snow in Philadelphia to Vancouver. It was gorgeous yesterday, by the way. I don't know what this is today, but I have an umbrella, so I think I now can officially say I've been in Vancouver because I got rained on. And then from there to Orlando, then back home. So I've been kind of a busy week this week, but it's all good. So who is ISACA? We are a global organization, about 140,000 strong, in 180 countries. We have 210 chapters worldwide, pretty much in every country in the world at this stage of the game. And really, we focus on areas such as audit, risk management, IT governance, and information security / cybersecurity. Our big thrust recently, obviously, has been in the cybersecurity space. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what we're doing. We also are known for something called COBIT. Has anybody heard of COBIT framework? Okay, that's us. So one of my new charges, I actually had the opportunity, I was in Africa on the island of Mauritius to speak in, I think it was October or beginning of November, I can't remember now. And in there we talked about COBIT, you know, because some organizations have been very successful applying it, some haven't been. To me the key thing is, and this is the way I look at cybersecurity, is you have to be pragmatic. So I said, take parts of COBIT that you need, apply them. The other parts you can either use or don't use as you go. But it's a huge product. We're actually re-looking at how we're going to be positioning that going forward. And obviously our certifications, the CISA, CISM. CISA is the one that we're probably most famous for auditors in the auditing profession. And obviously the CSX certification, which we just launched in August of this past year. This comes from our survey. We actually do a joint survey with RSA. Anybody heard of RSA? So we've been working with them for years, and this actually comes from our survey with them. This is actually going to be presented at the RSA conference in a month from now, so you didn't really see this, right? The key things are the same things you would expect, right? The things I've been talking about. Let's see if I get this pointer right. I'll try. There's 2 million, based on our research, there will be a shortage of 2 million professionals in cybersecurity by the year 2019, based on research that we've done working with them. 53% of organizations experience delays as long as 6 months finding qualified candidates. Basically, it's all validation, both in terms of the exposure of cybersecurity, the lack of talent, the ability to recruit them, and to actually solve business problems. Because in the end, cybersecurity is about enabling the business to succeed, enabling innovation in organizations, and that's really what ISACA is all about. So we don't look at this as being a negative thing. We look at it as an enabler. Career opportunities. So again, this is from our survey regarding the skill shortage. 82% predict that cyber attack's likely in 2015. That's a surprise, right? We highlight what the most common ones, and though they're successful, phishing still being really big, as well as malware. So the key thing I want to focus here on is the far left, which is what are some of the ideal professionals? What are their key characteristics? One's obviously hands-on experience. And we're going to talk about our credentialing program, which is very different from anyone else in the world. We are the only ones that do this way, and I'll explain that to you in a second. So in addition to the certification, to the technical skills, certification is important. Because in the end, how do you differentiate whether one person or another has the right set of skills? Just because someone passes the bar exam doesn't mean that they're a good lawyer. Just because they pass the medical, exams or whatever, it doesn't mean they're good doctors. But it does mean that they have the right skills. So it's a really key, important thing to make sure that the people you're bringing on actually have the right skills in a practical manner. So here's our market need that we said. We highlighted cybersecurity global concern. The research is clear. This is another thing that actually surprised me a little bit, which was this came from our surveys members, that they're more likely to hire candidates with a performance-based certification. And what's performance-based certification? Does anyone know? Okay, so most certifications, you go into a test center, you get your pencil, you have a book, or it might be online, it might be computer-based, but you still enter in stuff, okay? With a performance-based certification, there's no pad, there's no pen. It's you in a terminal. So when we talk about, again, I'm going to jump ahead to this one. So hold that thought for a second, because I really want, before I jump into the credential, because I'm real excited about it, let me take you a step back a little bit, and then we'll talk about that. So with that meeting we had with everyone, we developed this roadmap. And really, what we wanted to do was provide a holistic view to the profession. We didn't want to provide certification, we didn't want to provide training, we didn't want to provide career management, we didn't want to just provide white papers for people. We wanted to provide an overall approach for how you would look at your cybersecurity profession. That's really what our focus is. You'll end up having to let us know over time how successful we are in doing that. So what's it consist of? Obviously, credentialing and training, education conferences, membership where you get a lot of free resources. We have publications, and then career management. So when we look at this thing, we felt like we needed to provide all these elements so that someone would have a place they could actually rely on. We're going to talk about, so in terms of training, we have different kinds of training. We have what we call boot camp training, which is a one-week intense practitioner-based training. We're actually working with another association as we speak on putting together board-level training. So for corporate board members can actually be trained on what they need to know in cybersecurity, what kinds of questions they should be asking, and for those of us who are professionals, more importantly, what things shouldn't they be asking us? Let us do our job. We will let you know and work with you on those things, okay? So we're actually working with them on a certification program to do that, which will probably launch in the June timeframe. Education and conferences. We held our first cybersecurity conference last year in Washington, D.C. in November. It was sold out. We expected 750 people. We had 1,300 and had to turn them away. We had incredible speakers. It was actually a really good event. This year we're having 4. And I think I covered them at the end. We're having one in Singapore, Las Vegas, I forgot where in Europe now, and somewhere, and we're doing one in Africa as well. So it was a real big hit. The ratings we got and everything was incredible. Membership is obviously the basis for a lot of these aspects. Resources and publications, I'm going to cover one of them, a brand new one that we did on advanced persistent threats that we just released, which is free for those of you online, on what we're seeing and what some of the trends are and some of the challenges. And then what I really want to work on, an area that I have a lot of passion for, is career management. So we actually just launched this 2 weeks ago. So on our website, if you go in and register, you can go in and look at the different kinds of professions, practitioner, specialist, expert, etc. You can enter in your experiences, what experience you have, what skills you have, and it'll come back and tell you, give you a kind of a lesson plan of here's the things you need to work on if you want to get to the next level. So it's an interactive tool. We're really excited about it. You're going to have to give us feedback on what you like and what you don't like, because as with everything else, right, when you launch something, some things are going to be great, some things we're going to want to adjust. But the key focus is we're invested in the cybersecurity profession. Career, this is about a career. This is a great opportunity that's come in front of us, and we really want to make sure people take advantage of it. So in here you'll see what competencies you need, what skills you need. You enter in the things that you already have experience in. It'll highlight here, this is probably an area you want to focus on. Does that make sense? We also just launched a thing called Threats and Controls, part of this website as well, the CSX website. So in there, if you're interested in what the different threats and controls are, you can just go in there, click on APTs, and it'll drill down. It'll actually give you a diagram on what an APT looks like from start to finish. How do you start an APT? Which, okay, maybe we shouldn't be teaching people how to create APTs, but nevertheless, this is how they normally start. And it's kind of a cycle on how that works. So it gives you a very in-depth understanding very quickly on what the different threats and controls that are out there. Again, it's all education, so you can become more knowledgeable within the profession. Any questions? No. Is anybody still awake? So let's talk about our certification program. We have two levels of certification. So this is actually a certificate, and the other one's actually a credentialing program. So the Cybersecurity Fundamentals certificate is pretty much what you think it is. It's a fundamentals course. So it includes the definition of a lot of the terms that I just mentioned, APTs, DOS, DDoS, etc. But more importantly, and the thing I really like about this course, it also talks about important things like risk management. It talks about communications. Because in the end, you could be the most technical person in the world, but if you don't know how to effectively work with your superiors and talk in their language and focus on business challenges, you're not going to be successful. So in this fundamentals class, we actually, in the course, we actually cover that information as well. So it's not just a straight practitioner, heads down technical skill set. Does that make sense? Does anybody face that challenge where communications ends up being a big gap? Because it's something that we see all the time. And by the way, it's not just limited to cybersecurity. I can talk on and on about CIOs and how you can be successful and how you can fail miserably. I've done both. And what some of those differences are. And actually, it's the same kind of characteristics. Soft skills are so important, no matter what job you have. So let's talk a little bit about our credentialing program. So the CSX practitioner, which is the one we launched in August of this past year, as I mentioned, is a performance-based test. So what does that mean? That means you go to a Prometric center, you sit down in front of a terminal, and they launch 6 virtual machines. And you actually go through a simulation test. And as things happen and you respond, other things happen based on what your responses are. So at the end of the day, if you pass the exam, you've validated that you can handle most challenges. Because it's great to be able to read a book. It's great to be able to take an exam, memorize things, and answer them. But what happens when something really occurs? Are you or your team properly skilled to actually respond to those things? And that's really where we focus on the cybersecurity CSX practitioner exam. And that's something, by the way, that thought leadership group came up with. They said, you know, there's a lot of people talking at this level about cybersecurity. What's really missing in this marketplace is how do we train the right skilled people to actually fill those 2 million jobs that are going to be there. Does that make sense? It is a difficult exam. I will tell you the passing rate so far is about 20%. It is not an easy exam. Now, I also think it's because people have said, you know what, I'm a cybersecurity expert, I don't need to take the training class, I'll just go in there and ace this thing. And then they sit down and they're like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? So part of this is packaging it with making sure you have the right level of training. If you're an expert and you don't need it, that's great. But it really is a simulation. It's kind of a really cool thing. If you've ever seen it, I mean, it's not that exciting in terms of, you know, see Unix commands and stuff, but nevertheless, it is kind of cool because it is real time. Things do change. New incidents get raised and you have to respond. So that's really the way, a true measure of whether someone's a practitioner or not. And that's how we're positioning this. The next level up, for those of you who have heard of the NIST framework, there's 5 different types, or there's 5 different categories. So with each of those categories, identify, protect, recover, respond, and detect, we will have a specialist credential for each of those areas. So if you're a forensics expert, you will end up following one of those specialist paths. We expect to have the 5 specialist exams actually done about mid-year of this year. So for those of you who are curious how we do that too, is we create the exam, then we bring in a bunch of people to actually test them. We use the Navy as our pilot group for the CSX practitioner. They loved the exam, most didn't pass. I think they changed their opinion after they realized they didn't pass though, so I'm not sure which way to take it. So I'm going with the fact they loved the test when they were in there, not when they got the score and said, yeah, maybe this wasn't such a good idea. So I'm going with the former. So if you're okay, I'm going to take that poetic license. You okay with that? So that's where I'm going with it. And then obviously, then there's 2 different paths. Once you, and by the way, you don't actually have to go from practitioner to specialist to expert, or CISM, which would be the manager kind of person. So the expert would be that key person who is the expert in cybersecurity. So we probably won't have that exam done till the end of this year as we build up people through the pipeline. But you can go from practitioner to expert, or you can actually go from there into management, if you will, as well. So that's kind of our credentialing program. Are there any questions about that part of it? No. Okay. So again, here is probably a better description of what I just gave you of what they are. Again, it's a pretty intense program. We are looking for lighter levels. We have the fundamental certification. We have work that we're doing with the board members and C-suite that we're putting stuff together. So we're really trying to run the gamut of the whole spectrum of the profession. In terms of some of the things that we provide, these are things, again, that are available for free on the website as well, which is the implementation guidelines for the NIST cybersecurity framework and the EU one as well, which is actually fairly similar. I mentioned the Advanced Persistence Threat Study, which actually just came out at the end of 2015, which is actually a very good study, which again is something for you to do. We periodically put stuff out there that we think is relevant to the profession, so you stay up to date. We do a cybersecurity legislation watch on what's happening in the world in terms of cybersecurity legislation, which is germane to everything we do every day. Because all of us are, obviously, governments these days are very interested in cybersecurity, and they're passing legislations in different parts of the world. So it's an area that you can keep track of what's happening in the world. And then I mentioned the career roadmap, which I think is really important. It's interesting. We went back and forth. Do we do a career roadmap? Do we not do a career roadmap? This is so new that we thought it would be something different and novel. We probably wouldn't do it for our audit profession, but for cybersecurity, since it's so new, we thought, you know what, let's see what happens and let's do it. So I'd be interested in get your feedback on whether you like the roadmap or not, and whether it provides value to you, and what changes we should make. Because part of this whole thing, being innovative, is we're going to constantly change and make these things better and get your inputs. I mentioned upcoming elements. The threats and controls tool is actually already out there. That went live about a week ago. So I should have updated the slide. I didn't. And then I already mentioned the CSX specialists and experts. How am I doing on time? No, not too bad. In terms of our events, actually there's 3 of them. It's London that we're doing next year. Like I said, it was really an incredible panel discussions, and then we had some great keynotes as well, who really came in and kind of shed the light. It wasn't just a fear tactic. How many of you have been to cybersecurity conferences where they basically stand up on stage and scare the heck out of you the whole time and provide no solutions? Right? I mean, doesn't that happen all the time? That doesn't work for me. I'm scared enough as it is, right? There's enough things to worry about in life. The thing is, what do we do with that? And so what we try to do at our conference, we had people who actually gave us real statistics, but then they also went ahead and said, here's how we solve the problem. So that situation I described to you about the US power grid is a true story, which we could not talk about until the person who happened to work for the US government stood up on stage and talked about it. So I guess, well, if he talks about it, I can say something about it then. But the key thing is, they talked about how they tracked it down, how they were able to isolate it, which country it was, and I won't mention the name, but it is in Europe, it is in Asia. So, the good thing is they were just tracking. So again, it's the way it is the world today. So, but it was a very engaging speech. So kind of to bring it all back together, currently there's more than 1 million unfulfilled jobs. And this is actually coming from Cisco, who was here, was actually the title sponsor. The global markets need is clear. I think we provide an avenue for you to actually go down the training, go down the career path, look at the different skill sets that you have, map it to what's already in there, see where your gaps are. And one thing we're really working closely with a lot of organizations is really emphasizing the need for the CSX practitioner exam. There are other associations who have exams, and that's great. I think but this is the only performance-based one. It's the only way that you can really tell whether someone knows their stuff or doesn't know their stuff. And we continue our CSX roadmap. We're constantly adding new training and new capabilities, new white papers, letting you know what's happening in the world today, as well as our conferences. So with that, here's the URL if you want to go there. Now you have to be, you have to register yourself. You don't actually have to be an ISACA member, but you do have to register, so we need your information, a minimal amount of information to have access to it. Feel free to go to the site. We hope that you are interested in becoming a member. There's a lot of other benefits and opportunities there for you to participate with your peers. Justin, who is an executive member of the Vancouver chapter, I'm sure can talk to you more about the importance of chapters, and because we look at it as there's a local presence is so critical to your everyday, the people you work with day in and day out, as well as ISACA International that tries to give you kind of the gamut of what's happening across the world. So we have the breadth of ability to provide those things for you. Okay? Any questions? Sure.
Yeah. What do you think the new certification will help covering the gap, and why the other certifications are not covering the gap? And the other question is, do you think the market will pay for the extra premium to having those skills or that certification? I don't know if they stay, but here in Canada, particularly BC, I don't think the market is paying a lot more than you have certification.
I think, those are two good questions. First one, why do we think it's different? Why do you think it's going to make a difference? Because what we've seen in the marketplace, not just in this particular area, but in other professions. I was going to mention where I came from. I won't mention where I came from, or where I was before I came to ISACA. But a lot of people memorize books to take exams to get a certification. They walk out of the exam after they've memorized it, they really can't practice anything. And I think what we see in other professions is the certifications sort of become a little devalued. So it's great to have a name, having a designator, but what does it really mean? And I think the thought leaders that we got together when we said, okay, what problem do we want to solve, was we obviously need to get more skilled people in the workforce. Okay, if we do that, do we create a paper and pen-based test? And the answer was, what value is that again? So the supposition here is because cybersecurity is special, it's very dynamic, things change all the time, our profession is changing all the time, you have to have the right skills, and a paper and pen test based on things that were written yesterday or something, or a year ago, isn't going to be sufficient to validate their skill set. So we do see it as being, because of where cybersecurity is today. I mean, obviously the talk today is, APTs. I don't know what the conversation will be tomorrow, but we need to make sure our skilled professionals are able to handle those as well. And that's why we think it's going to be that much more important. With regards to your other question about the paying for it, I think, again, with markets, one thing we're working is with governments and organizations on these subjects. I think that demand will end up happening because the organizational need for cybersecurity, while enabling business innovation, is critical right now. Having a pragmatic view of what your cybersecurity program is and your profile in terms of what your investment, what you're willing to invest, and identifying what is it you really have to protect and what is it that that's not really worth the investment to protect. I think organizations are starting to go through those processes now. Before it was nobody cares about security, right? Then it was everyone cares about everything about security. And now I think we're evolving into reality, which is, okay, we have to have a pragmatic look at this. So I think this will play very strongly into that place. And when it comes to paying for it, the organizations that have been breached, I think, have enough testament. Because not only are they losing money for IP, not only are they getting embarrassed socially, in terms of social media and what people are saying about, their capabilities. Then on top of it, you have governments that are actually fining these companies on top of all the money they lost, on top of the IP, on top of what people are saying about them. So financially, it's going to make a lot of sense too. And that's really what the message is. It's been pretty well received so far. So, good question.
I was just going to say and add to that, I read a survey that the average income, for various different security certifications, they kind of list them. Right at the top of the list is the CISM and the CISA. And if you're, sitting in this room and you're one of those people that's having difficulty getting money out of senior leadership or security projects, the vernacular of the Cybersecurity Nexus program isn't as techy as, say, a CISSP. It's more around governance and policy and control and risk management. It's the language that your board and your executive want to hear when you're talking to them and asking them for money and telling them about the problem that you're trying to solve. And so, that's why you might want to make an investment in, a cybersecurity nexus designation, because A, you might make more money. That's kind of cool. And two, you're going to have more credibility when you're dealing with your senior leaders within your organization. And that's huge in terms of getting your job done, being able to, be empowered to, be a practitioner, to be a practitioner of security. So there's my plug for the Cybersecurity Nexus.
Any other questions? One back there.
Yeah, Frank, you mentioned, I came a little bit after you started, but there was the legislation watch.
Mm-hmm.
Did you already elaborate about that, how it is able to cover legislation for Canada specifically, and as it may be applicable for different industries, and how do you subscribe to that and make use of the information?
So the question was about the legislation watch capability. It's actually part of the Cybersecurity Nexus program. So on the website itself, you can actually see it. We track cybersecurity legislation around the world. Do we have a specific focus on Canada? We do not. We also don't have a specific focus on the US for that matter. So we do try to report on what we're seeing out there in any common trends, so that you're aware of those things. Because in the end, obviously, your board members or C-suite is going to be asking you those questions. Hey, I just read an article, or I saw something on television about this. What can you tell me about it? And you need to be aware of that. So it's really more that kind of information that we're trying to publish out there. If you have specific sources that you find very useful, I'd be more than happy to hear about them, and we may either already incorporate them, or if it's not, then we'd be happy to add them in as well. So. Again, this is a growing, evolving capability. This is going to be your capability. So with the input and the feedback you guys provide us is critical to the success for all of us.
I think the other point that is worth making is look around you. We have established a movement, the BC Aware campaign, that's going to be an ongoing thing. And this is a movement that belongs to all of us, right? Take ownership over it. Next year we're going to do this again, and it's going to build and grow. So it's not just about the designation, it's about being a part of a community where people can cross-pollinate their skills and learn from each other. So think of it that way, and get involved. This many hands make light work, let's put it that way.
I will tell you, because I'm not as familiar with the Canadian job market, but I will tell you in the US, if you are a cybersecurity professional, you can pretty much quote what you want, salary-wise. There's such a demand. Now, the good thing is, obviously, a lot of organizations have good benefits and things like that, and people don't like to jump around. But there is a huge, huge need for skills, and organizations are paying for those today. So,
how many people have been pinged in the last 3 months on LinkedIn that there's a security professional? Really, come on, hands up. Anyone in the security profession who's had someone headhunting you on LinkedIn? Yeah.
3 this past week.
Yeah.
there you go.
So you're not going to have a problem getting employed. That's not the issue here. There's over 1 million open headcounts globally in the security profession. This campaign, the net proceeds of the sponsorships from this campaign will be spent on training people in cybersecurity. I'm kind of stealing your thunder a little bit here. But we've got some money left over. We're going to fill some rooms with folks who want to learn this stuff. And we're going to do a couple of them. So fill in your information. We're going to send out a survey, a post-event survey. One of the questions will be, are you interested in cybersecurity training from ISACA? So we're going to get some instructors and fill some rooms with folks like you if you're interested. And we're going to do the Cybersecurity Nexus 101 training. And we're going to get as many people in this city trained up on this stuff as possible. And then there's other layers of training that you'll be able to do. But again, that's part of what the BC Aware campaign is. You're reaching out to the post-secondary institutions. There are events within this campaign taking place at post-secondary institutions in this province over the next 2 weeks, and we're going to be trying to draw more young people into the profession. We definitely need it. And the government, Gary Perkins is in the room. He cares about this stuff, I think. Got a few open head counts over there, Gary?
Just a few.
Yeah, so just so you know, probably in 3 to 6 months, I'm going to be giving up my CIO role, and I'm going to become a cybersecurity professional because I'll probably make more money.
Does anyone else have any questions? This is, let's make this open and interactive as possible. Anybody? Yeah.
What is the passing percentage for the CXP?
Right now, it's about 20%. There is so we go through a formal ANSI standard cut score and a whole bit, but because as I mentioned, I think what's happened with the people who have applied, they come in and said, I'm an expert, I can do anything, and they don't necessarily do some of the training. So we generally recommend they do at least some of the training before they actually take the certification. I think it'll obviously go way north of that. I think 50 to 60% will probably be a good number. Right now it's 20%. It is not a cakewalk exam, I don't want to scare anybody because I think if you're a professional and you know what you're doing and you learn the things, you'll be fine. So the people who've gone through training have done much better than those who haven't. So thank you all for attending.
Thanks very much,
Thank you.
Frank. Appreciate it.
Thank you.